With the data then gathered at the end of April, in early May, I then engaged ChatGPT to review and consolidate all the questions that those in the network want the election candidates to answer. That is, I simply copied the questions from the survey, SurveyMonkey, and asked ChatGPT to consolidate them down and generate a series of questions. And it did exactly that. Gave me 11 questions after first providing what the two parties stood for. And that is, I asked it to determine just what its perspective was of the leanings or of the background or of the differences between the two parties. And this is what it provided, that the Conservative Party, UCP of Alberta, generally advocates for free market principles, reducing government spending and deregulation in order to promote economic growth and job creation. They've also pledged to cut taxes, balance the budget, and increase funding for healthcare and education. And by comparison, the Alberta New Democratic Party generally advocates for a more interventionistic government approach with policies aimed at reducing income inequality, increasing access to healthcare and education, and protecting the environment. They've also pledged to invest in renewable energy and infrastructure and to prioritize support for workers and families. Now, remember, this has not been received by either party. This was what ChatGPT assembled it and put this together in the blink of an eye. Then, with those 11 questions, Jeff helped me by engaging Bing with ChatGPT to make sure that we had current information. And that one of the analysis that I did was still showing Jason Kenney as the premier. And I realized that that's not the database I wanted to work from, but Bing was more current. And so he suggested we use Bing. And Bing was prompted with the following question, that the Alberta provincial election campaign is underway because it as of Monday. Can you answer each of the following questions based on publicly available information from the perspective of the Alberta UCP party and then from the Alberta NDP party? Now, if candidates are listening, they may find it of value to know what questions are generally generated when you canvass the public. And secondly, how one might go about answering that aligned with where their party is. Whether this is correct or not, none of us know for sure. This is what ChatGPT has scraped off publicly available information. So the first question of the 11 is, what is your vision for prompting innovation and supporting the development of innovative systems that benefit all Albertans and businesses? Now, John, with your background, you're in business, you understand the relevance of innovation in the economy. But why would this question be important for a candidate in Alberta today?
What I'm intrigued with was so many of the questions lead with, what is your vision of? And so, clearly your membership wanted to know about longer term thinking than just, quarterly results or winning the election in 30 days. And then what are you going to do? So I really love the premise of so many of the questions are really looking further out. Mm-hmm. And from the business standpoint, we've heard it a lot over the last while. In order to attract business and investment, people need to feel confident in the long-term plan, as opposed to, I'll make a business decision today, and then there'll be all these changes tomorrow. And it's a longer cycle than 3 months, 6 months, or a year.
I agree absolutely with John. And I think that one of the things that both parties have to do is say, let's suggest a long-term plan, because that's how good things get done. And regardless of who comes in, let's work on this together. I don't know if that would ever happen in Alberta.
Well, that in itself is an interesting perspective, is the extent to which there is any interest in collaboration between parties today. But that's another issue. One of the things I'll share with you now, and that we've talked about it many times in the past, is when we talk about economic resilience, or we talk about the capacity of the province to recover from shocks in the price of oil or wheat, et cetera, when we ask them the relevance of the innovation ecosystem, or innovation systems, if you will, it rates well over 90% of people agreeing that it is a significant component of really a healthy economy. So this question does seem relevant in that regard. Now let's turn to what the two parties might say. The UC Party's response is their vision for promoting innovation and supporting the development of innovation systems is to create a competitive business environment that attracts investment and talent, and to support research and development in key sectors such as energy, agriculture, health, and technology. The party has launched the Innovation Employment Grant to provide a 20% tax credit for small and medium-sized businesses that invest in research and development, so encouraging that field, and is committed to investing another $175 million over 3 years in the Alberta Innovates program to fund innovation projects. On the other hand, the Alberta NDP party's response is somewhat different. Their vision for promoting innovation and supporting innovation systems development is to invest in public services, invest in education, invest in research and infrastructure that foster creativity, collaboration, and social justice. There's a social tinge here, and the Alberta NDP party has committed to creating a $15 billion Alberta Future Fund. That's not small change, to support public projects in areas such as renewable energy, transportation, broadband, affordable housing. The Alberta NDP party has also pledged to restore funding for post-secondary institutions and research grants that were cut by the UCP government. So you can see a little bit of the differences here, and placing or committing money to the field of research and the areas are identified. But when we ask ChatGPT to look at these two and then tell us, what are the key differences? The UCP party focused creating a business-friendly environment and supporting private sector innovation. Note, they didn't suggest that government would be doing, but rather government would be investing in the private sector for innovation, while the NDP party focused on investing in public or government services and infrastructure and supporting public sector innovation. So one of them obviously shows a bias toward the private sector, the other more toward the role of government itself.
My pain was always the social investments are always welcome. In the end, all our effort goes for the good of the society. But in order to invest, you have to have what to invest. So my concern on the NDP side is that it's not a sustainable proposition if you don't have an active economic sector. What would you use to make the monies that you're investing in the other areas?
So you see the economy as needing to be robust, in order to finance the.
Yes. So you need an economy, and then you can apply policies with a social orientation, but you need the economy. Okay, well, otherwise you're in the business of printing money forever.
Okay, that's more of a general point, that in order to innovate from your perspective, you got to make sure you've got adequate funds sitting in the till. And if you don't have a healthy economy, you don't have that financing. So 15 billion is not small change. I must say, on reading both of these, that is a large investment. And it is clear that that investment is for public projects. I think that's a key element. What they're targeting are clearly areas that we're seeing a lot of interest in. Rural broadband has always been an issue of how to get the last mile completed. The issues of affordable housing are certainly important and relevant today. And we certainly hear with concerns about climate change that party in particular is interested in mitigating climate change through the development of alternative energies like what we have in wind and solar and geothermal, et cetera. But on the other side, we're seeing an investment through a tax credit, which is a fascinating way to incent small and medium-sized businesses to be innovative and invest in research and development. So we've clearly got a different approach, both clearly with a vision that is focused on innovation, but different methodologies to achieve similar goals. John, you want to add any color there?
To Bogdan's point, it's interesting. I thought we might see the word profit come up in here somewhere on this question, because it is used as a bad word at times and is used as a very good word at times. And to Bogdan's point, unless you have those private private enterprises producing profit, they don't have the money to invest in it. And
Well,
back to
one might jump in here and say that Keynesian theory says government doesn't need money; it can print it. It can go into debt. It could finance the future based on tax dollars of the future, which means building debt and not being afraid of it. We've certainly had in Ottawa a view that economies will fix themselves, and a less concern about the growing and the building of debt in order to do good things for the public. Now, I don't want to lean left, right, or even be centrist for that matter, but there is a view that government can print money. Government can go into debt to do good things. One of them being innovation, and that approach is more likely coming from the left than from the right, which is more concerned with issues of debt. But we'll go on. We'll go on and see whether that particular principle applies throughout. So the next question is, what are your short and long-term objectives for growing the economy? And what strategies will you deploy to make this happen? So in this question itself, obviously the operative word is growth. There's some that feel government should not be playing a role at all in economics, that this is more a matter for whatever forces and sources of change there are to take hold and grow the economy through those forces rather than through government manipulation. But let's see what they have to say in that regard. So, John, you want to add anything further as to why, what we might expect as differences or what this is really all about?
I read an article yesterday from the Prime Minister of Ireland, and he had come out with a very, very strong left view that that growth, we're taking this word growth for granted, and that we have to stop expecting growth because we can't just keep growing. And so it was a very interesting position. It'll be fun to watch the debate happening in Ireland and in Europe over that one. But well, that whole premise of long-term objectives for growing, I think it's really important because Alberta has grown to the size where we have much more potential for influence in the country. I'm not sure we have the proper representation for it, but that growth gives us, strength in a variety of different areas. So it'd be fun to see the answers here.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there is, in fact, a growing controversy on whether or not sustainable growth is, in fact, sustainable, given its impact on the environment, given the fact that we've got an aging population, given the fact that government's capacity to finance the welfare state is coming into question. We've seen that riots in France over adjustments. So let's take a look at what we've got as long and short term. So I'll read NDP's party first. The Alberta NDP party's short and long-term objectives for growing Alberta's economy are create good jobs, okay, support workers and families, clearly, diversify the markets, we've been talking about that for some time, and transition to a low-carbon future. The Alberta NDP party has proposed a job creation tax credit to provide a 10% rebate for businesses that hire new employees or increase wages. So there's an incentive there for hiring, and a better deal for families, clearly a focus on the social element contributing to or being affected by the economy, to provide universal childcare, lower prescription drug costs, and raise the minimum wage. The Alberta NDP party has also advocated for expanding market access for Alberta's resources and to developing a Green New Deal to reduce emissions and create green jobs. I mean, bottom line, very creative input on this part of the NDP as it relates to how long and short term to grow the economy. On the UCP party side, its long and short term objectives for growing the economy are, again, create jobs, reduce taxes, cut red tape, clearly also diversify markets, and defend the energy industry. UCP party has implemented the job creation tax cut to reduce the corporate tax rate from 12% to 8%. So I gather a reduction in tax rates should in fact be a stimulus for corporate investment by 2022, where we are now, and launch the red tape reduction action plan to eliminate unnecessary regulations and streamline government processes. So, getting government to back off as a impediment to growth The UCP party also supported the development of pipelines and other infrastructure projects to access new markets for Alberta's resources, and has stood up to the federal government and other opponents of the energy sector. So clearly there is an orientation to taking what we have today, securing it, ensuring it's sustainable as a contributor. When we look at the key differences, the UCP party focuses on reducing taxes and regulations for businesses and supporting the traditional energy sector. So clearly giving the boost to those that it believes are core to the economy, while the NDP focuses on providing social supports and services for the workers and their families and supporting the transition to a low carbon economy. So clear differences there. Anyone want to elaborate or comment?
There's an excellent book out there called The Limit to Growth. And if you read it, it's been around for a while. It's really quite depressing to read it, because it says that we're on a trajectory from which, unless we do something major, there is no return, and we're pretty much all damned, you know. So I really think that, you know, this question is really naive in a way, in that we should be looking at limiting growth, not increasing it.
So that's inherent in the way the question is answered. If we'd asked either party, what are you prepared to do to ensure that growth is sustainable, and that
isn't sustainable.
ramifications of it are not negative?
But growth isn't sustainable. That's the point.
Let's go on to the next one. How will you ensure that Alberta's workforce is trained and equipped to meet the demands of a rapidly changing job market? And how will you encourage the development of new industries? Now, we didn't cite with the arrival of emerging technologies such as ChatGPT or alternative energies, but the focus here is clearly on a trained workforce, on concerns that we may be graduating PhD candidates who end up driving taxis, and focus on the fact that the job market not only is changing now, but may well even change more rapidly into the future. So most of us have children or grandchildren and have faced the question, what will I be when I grow up? Or what many things may I be when I grow up? And I think this is zeroing in on that question. John, you want to comment and add anything to this question?
With Alberta Enterprise Group, there's a lot of work done on this. Many of our member companies were members of this, the skills for jobs committees and that sort of thing. It's a real challenge right now for traditional businesses to find skilled trade workers. The trucking industry is probably the best example, where truck drivers left the road during COVID and got a job delivering for Amazon, and they're home every night. And now there's 12,000 jobs that are open that trucking companies need and can't fill at the moment. So there's these traditional jobs, and then there's all of the what I don't care what your question is, the answer is technology. We have to get people there as well. So finding young people's interests and aligning them earlier, because many of the trades end up finding their jobs at age 26, 27, 28, because they're kind of kicking around because they weren't really prepared for some of those things. So we kind of got this dichotomy of traditional business and the needs they have, and then this incredible AI world, with Richard Sutton and friends. So very interesting dilemma that we have in terms of getting the right people into the right seats on the bus.
I know there are obviously two dimensions. One of them is the workforce, as you pointed out today, that make sure that our refrigerator is fixed, that our lawns are mown, and that our grandparents are well taken care of. Thank you very much. And the other, which is the development of new industries, which has a research element to it, with a lot of thinking. The knowledge workers fit in there, and not necessarily the labor workers. So it's having that balance. Well, let's see what the workforce of the future may well be from the perspective of the two parties. Starting with UCP, their plan is to meet the demands of a rapidly changing job market, is to invest in skills development apprenticeship programs, and post-secondary education. They've created and released the Alberta 2030 Building Skills for Job Strategy, which sets the roadmap for a re-envisioned post-secondary system. A re-envisioned post-secondary system focused on high-quality education and the skills and training needed for Alberta's future. The UC Party has also increased funding for skills for jobs initiatives, such as the Alberta Trades Hall of Fame and High School Apprenticeship Scholarship and Women Building Futures program. So clearly a recognition of the importance of the trades in the future, but also taking a new look, I guess, by looking at the post-secondary education system we've got today and looking at how it might be modified going into the future. From the NDP party's perspective, they plan to ensure that the workforce is trained and equipped through a variety of means, and one to invest in skills development. That sounds similar. Apprenticeship programs, that sounds similar. And they use the term lifelong learning, implying maybe the first certificate you get is not the last certificate you get, and the job that you have today may not be the job you have tomorrow or the one for the future. The Alberta NDP party's promised to create 75,000 new skills for job spaces over the next decade, with a focus on high demand fields such as healthcare, technology, and trades. The NDP party is also committed to expanding tuition grants and student loan relief for post-secondary students and graduates, an issue that we've certainly heard students complaining about, and that is the ever-increasing cost of higher education and the debts which they carry forward, whether it be in the professions or otherwise. When we look at the key differences, the UCP party focuses on reforming the post-secondary system and supporting skills development in key sectors, while the NDP party focuses on creating more opportunities and supports for post-secondary students and graduates. So one is before the fact and one is almost after the fact. I think that's a key difference that I would read into that summary. Anyone else want to share with us the perspectives which this has triggered from you, Bogdan?
Yeah, there is a difference. Is when you improve the education, you're fostering agility in responding to the market needs. When you create from a centralized position more opportunities, you're guessing the market. So you're much more open to not responding to how the market actually evolves. So the education gives you the tools. The other approach prepares you in from the perspective that what you're prepared for will be out there.
You know, the growth in the advanced education system in Canada for the last 20, 30 years has been in the professional schools, the providing to society of knowledge workers in health, education, law, public policy. Those knowledge workers are the ones that ChatGPT and emerging technologies are most likely to be threatening. So when you see on one side a re-envisioning of the post-secondary system, it might be picking up on the fact that the knowledge workers themselves are the ones that may well be most vulnerable going into the future, not the trades workers, where we see continuing demand. And in fact, with an aging population, a workforce that may need to be supplemented. I didn't see the word immigration in here at all. And yet that appears to be a strategy often taken where, whether it be in Europe or in the United States, and clearly with 1 million coming into Canada now, a strategy that isn't necessarily training the workforce that is resident today, but bringing a workforce into the country as a population ages, and as does the workforce, whether it be in trucking, as you pointed out, John, or otherwise. So let's go on to the next question. This, by the way, is a fascinating topic.
Before we go down there, Barry,
Yeah,
I suspect that everybody on here has a leaning one direction or the other. And I haven't heard anybody disagree with ChatGPT in terms of that's not really the position of the party. So I'm hoping we'll get some disagreement with ChatGPT. I don't want to take all their words at gospel.
Well, How will you diversify Alberta's economy and promote growth, back again, in non-traditional industries? And what policies will you put in place to support these efforts? Now, this is a bit of a twist on two of the former questions. It is zeroing in on the economy, but in this instance, directly committed to diversification and promoting growth in non-traditional industries and the policies, not necessarily the practices, but the policies to support these efforts. So this question is a bit of a wrinkle, or takes a slightly different approach than the ones that have come earlier. Okay, well, let's jump right ahead then. The UCP party obviously took this seriously. It's a lengthy response, as is NDP's. Their strategy to diversify the economy and promote growth in the non-traditional industries would be to leverage Alberta's strengths, that's what we do today, and opportunities in emerging sectors, which is off that today, so such as technology, hydrogen, petrochemicals, geothermal energy, all of these having some energy component, minerals or mining, tourism and agriculture. So these are really rather traditional. It's also announced the new emissions reduction and energy development plan that will chart Alberta's course for cutting emissions, attracting investment, and growing the economy. I'll underscore the attracting investment because there was a question that emerged in the network that we didn't pose today that related to attracting investment. So it's touched on here. The party has also invested in various initiatives to support non-traditional industries, such as Alberta Technology Innovation Network, the Alberta Enterprise Corporation, Alberta Petrochemicals Incentive Program, Alberta Geothermal Development Strategy, Alberta Tourism and Growth Innovation Fund. So they're underscoring what they have done already, have already put in place, but citing some of the things that they have announced that relate to emissions reduction and attracting investment. On the other hand, the NDP has provided us with investing in emerging technologies such as technology, again, renewable energy, again, tourism, again, agriculture, again, and culture. The Alberta NDP party has announced a $200 million innovation fund to support startups and entrepreneurs in high growth sectors, and $100 million in a renewable energy fund to support community-owned and Indigenous-owned renewable energy projects. The Alberta NDP party has also proposed various initiatives to support non-traditional industries such as Alberta Tourism Strategy, Alberta Film and Television Tax Credit, the Alberta Local Food Act, and Alberta Culture Days. So there is a nuance of differences here from one that is looking at traditional and non-traditional industries and how to shape them into the future. And the other one actually brings in some social elements, the Indigenous population, the supporting of family-owned or community-owned and renewable energy projects. So nuances of difference there, which the key differences show up as the UCP party focusing on supporting industries relating to or derived from the energy sector, and the NDP focus on supporting industries that are more environmentally friendly and culturally diverse.
Barry, if I may jump in, I was reading about lithium and the lithium that is required for the batteries. And Alberta has a surprising supply of lithium in a couple of different areas. The Leduc stream has a lot of lithium in it. And there's actually a lot of lithium in the byproduct of some of the wells. And so it's funny because we've got this environmentally friendly on one side and we've got the energy sector on the other. But back to Alona's comment earlier, this is where they come together, right? We have to use the word and instead of or. We have to get people putting those two pieces together. So, again, if somebody were to properly put those two thoughts together, I think as a province, we're going to thrive because we could be a very prominent player in the battery business.
Well, you make a good point. I mean, lithium clearly being one of the ingredients that is critical to electric vehicles, to battery production.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see how the two parties would go about answering the question, how would you go about growing a lithium business? It's an interesting question on the approaches because they have clearly two different methodologies. Mm-hmm. One is seeing government as the vehicle for actually doing something, and the other one is seeing government as the vehicle for incenting something, believing in another and taking the initiative itself. So that seems to be one of the primary differences between the two, and also the relevance of supporting today's energy versus supporting tomorrow's. How will you improve healthcare in Alberta? Oh, the healthcare issue. We have finally arrived, and ensure that all Albertans have access to high quality healthcare services. Does anyone want to kick this one off? Go ahead, John. That's what you're here for as our commentator. What's your perspective on opening up the discussion here?
I was invited and joined the board of what was called the Caritas Health Group just after a fellow by the name of Ralph Klein came into power and did a rather significant cut to the healthcare system. So I got to see the whole inside workings, and here we sit, probably no further ahead 30 years later. It's a very difficult one because from the provincial budget standpoint, we could put every dollar we have into healthcare and there would still be a huge need that's unmet. And so where's the line in that piece? And it's very difficult because on the NDP side or on the left side, it's meet the needs, we'll worry about the money later. And on the right is we're going to stop at some point. And we have to learn to say no. So those two are just colliding tremendously. And the decision to say no, I just didn't like it when I was my mom. I want the healthcare system to be perfect for me, and then you can cut the other stuff later. So it's very hard to deal with.
This question, there's no question this question is timely. Not just because we have an aging population, which is going to be increasingly reliant on healthcare in all respects, both the chronic as well as the urgent and critical and emergent. But we also have the discussion on at the federal level, which is money. I mean, the federal government is supposed to be providing a portion of the funds without strings tied to the provinces, but as recently said, there will be strings attached. We want to see some reform, and we're challenging the province to show how they will reform, targeting specifically waiting lists. And for any of us that have used the healthcare system or the telecommunications system for that matter, waiting seems to be one of the things you can be absolutely guaranteed you're going to experience. So until the waiting list begins to dwindle, the confidence and the trust in the system is going to be limited. Mm-hmm. But the dialogue needs to be more than just about money. Reform isn't just throwing money at a system which has problems, but maybe looking at how we need to better manage the system as opposed to administer it. Managing being balancing supply and demand, making sure that doctors are seeing people who actually are in need of the services for which they've arrived at it. And emergency wards are certainly full of people that are not requiring emergency. Can't they be intercepted in some clinic or some other fashion? So I'm looking forward to an answer here that shows a perspective on the relevance of managing the resources that we have better than simply throwing more money at the problem. So I'll start out with the NDP party's approach to improving healthcare is to ensure that Albertans have access to high quality. So the word access here is key. To reverse the cuts and privatization plans of the UCP government implied, and expand public coverage and delivery of essential health services. So they want to grow it, they want to expand it, and they want to make sure that the cuts are eliminated and that the quality of services is high. The parties vowed to protect public health care from UCP's attempts to introduce user fees, delist services, lay off workers, contract out surgeries. So they're clearly articulating what they see the UCP is doing as negative, and these are things that they will reverse and make sure don't proceed. They've pledged to expand public coverage for dental care, mental health, seniors care, pharma care, and reproductive health. So there probably is nothing in there that doesn't touch on all of us. On the other side, the UCP party, to improve healthcare, says it will ensure that all Albertans have access, a key word again, to high quality healthcare services by reforming the health system, restoring local decision making, and that is pushing the decision-making further out from central, directing more resources to frontline care, which is where the services are rendered, reducing wait times. Well, I guess I walked into that. Improving access to primary care and expanding supports for mental health and addictions. The party also wants to or has already introduced public health care guarantee and a commitment to maintaining or increasing health spending and ensuring universal access to publicly funded services. So countering some of the negatives on the other side. The UC parties also implemented various measures to improve healthcare delivery and improve outcomes, such as creating more than 1,000 continuing care spaces. That's your seniors. Launching a new surgical wait times initiative, important. Expanding virtual care options, new technology. Investing $140 million in mental health and addiction services, and establishing a new mental health campus in Alberta or in Edmonton. Key differences are the UC party focuses on reforming the health system to introducing more private sector involvement and efficiency measures. And that is to ensure that competitive forces are employed in order to contain costs and address issues of quality. While the NDP focuses on protecting the public health system by expanding public coverage and delivery of health services. So the protection that they see is through expansion of coverage and delivery to ensure more people are covered and that the delivery is there. Okay, your turn. What do you see and what do you recommend that may not be in this list already? I didn't see the word innovation anyplace, but go ahead, Alona.
I didn't see innovation and I didn't see ethical questions either. And those are huge moral questions. And those are huge decisions, given that I believe it's up to 40% of public money goes to healthcare. That may be high, but between 26 and 40%.
And it hasn't been shrinking even as a percentage.
Anyway, our population is rapidly aging. And, you know, I keep going back and I feel for you, all of you who've lost parents recently. I lost my own mother. However, at 93, she was given a hip surgery. I don't know what the cost of that is. I guess the quality of life, the outcomes from these expensive surgeries, can the public system justify them? Just a question.
Well, that's the issue of delisting and the concern that the NDP has cited of a concern that one of the ways to reduce costs is to just decide we're not going to cover that and leave it for the private sector or insurance companies. You know, that hasn't been touched on here at all, is the role that insurance companies play today in providing that supplementary cost coverage that enables you to go to Mexico for your dental care. Go ahead, Brogdon.
It's the classic doing things right versus doing the right thing. So I think in this synthesis, I feel that UCP is more on the doing the right thing versus NDP that wants to do things righter, so to speak. So it's easy to claim access and universal access and high quality and so on if you don't put the right infrastructure in place. And the infrastructure that we have from my 8 years of working in healthcare wouldn't foster that. So to me, if you scale what we have exactly now, you're gonna just get more waste with very little improvement.
So more of the same does not appear to be a strategy. More
of the same to me. This is a I don't know, the word that comes to my mind is bribing for votes, because it's not actually doable. It's not actually achievable. Again, as a person that has worked as a business architect and then director for business and technical integration, over thousands of projects and programs. So I'm leaning on the side of making sure that we do the right thing.
Well, the easy thing is to simply say we'll throw more money at it and we'll provide coverage. And with that, you'll have more access because there's going to be more, meaning more. The other one is probably harder to sell, requiring leadership that says we're going to engage in reform. We have a system today that may not be fitting to today's population. We have a system today that may be more expensive, and it certainly is, than virtually any other system that we can point to. Reform is called for. But that means challenging people that are working in that system today. So that may be a threat to the status quo. We'll leave it at that, but that calls for leadership. Probably more where leadership is called for is in reform. Leadership is not called for in throwing more money at it unless the population is reluctant to accept the fact that it's going to be a cost to the taxpayer. Let's move on.
Can I say something? I have a huge concern in this area, and they're talking about access to healthcare. Personally, I had 2 doctors that retired, and I was told to go and see a third one that is not at all interested in being my doctor. And you think I can find a new one? They just aren't available. And recently they discussed on the news that they had tried to invite 42 family doctors to come to Alberta. I'm not sure if it was Alberta or Edmonton, and 0 were interested. So I think we have some issues to deal with in terms of changing our image and how healthcare is being dealt with by the government. They keep on saying, well, yes, we need the frontline people. Is that really happening? And why have they made it so unattractive for the doctors to be here? Because as one had said, we have an aging population. And yes, I do recognize you can't keep everybody alive on assisted means, but we have a serious problem here, and which party is going to resolve it? I don't know. UCP has had a very bad history, in my opinion, and I would like to see some change rather than the continual rhetoric that we're going to fix it, and I don't see any difference.
Well, I think the common word that I heard you refer to of change is called for. We've known that for years. We've even had Premier Klein, who said he was going to change the system, what was unable to do so. So there's something very sticky in the voter that has made change extremely difficult, and yet we have a very different population to serve today than we had in the past. We have rising issues of mental health. We have an aging population. This is a very different set of needs than what we had when we had people in their 30s and 40s, or a younger population. So not only does that call for reallocation of resources, it calls for reallocation of resources. And that requires leadership, because there are those that don't want to move things around and want to leave things just as they are, even though they're not necessarily fitting. But we need to move on. I jotted a note down here, Shirley, and I think coming into the fall, we will target a series on healthcare itself. Over the summer, we'll do some homework on how do we address the various aspects of what's called for in reform. And by that time, either a new government or the current government will be in place, and we'll be in a position to do some challenging. So thank you for speaking up today. On to the next topic. Will you move the carbon levy to an Alberta system? What policies will put in place to manage that revenue for innovation and economic growth? What is the carbon levy, and why is this relevant to Alberta voters? John, you want to kick this off? Just give us some clarity before we look at what the 2 parties have to say.
Well, it's an interesting question, even how it's worded. I'm not sure what was fed into the system from everybody's input, but the different provinces have different systems, and the federal government certainly has a strong opinion on putting their system in place. So I'll be intrigued to see what the ChatGPT came up with in terms of where it got its data from.
Well, one of the points that I think is important to clarify, and I'm not sure citizens really realize this, that the Alberta government today has protected us from the carbon levy by paying that at the government level, so we don't pay it at the pump. Whereas in virtually all the other provinces, you've had a 29-cent increase in the price of gasoline. Now, in Alberta, it's the cheapest in Canada because that levy is covered by the provincial government as its way of mitigating the impact of the federal government's policy position And that levy is going to get higher. Okay, well, let's jump ahead. I know time's moving on. So we'll start out with NDP first. They've defended the provincial carbon levy. So it's provincial, introduced by its government in 2017, and has opposed the federal carbon tax that replaced it after the UCP government scrapped the levy. The NDP party has argued that the provincial carbon levy was more effective and fairer than the federal one, and as it allowed Alberta to keep and reinvest the revenue in green initiatives such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, public transit, and innovation. The NDP party has also claimed that the provincial carbon levy has helped reduce greenhouse gas emissions and create jobs while providing rebates and exemptions for low and middle income households and trade exposed industries. So they clearly see that the Alberta approach has been beneficial to Alberta itself. Whereas the UCP party has vowed to scrap the provincial carbon levy that was introduced by the NDP government and replace it instead with a new system that only applies to large industrial emitters. The UCP party has implemented the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Regulation. It's a $30 per ton carbon price for facilities that emit more than 100,000 tons of greenhouse gases per year. The UCP party has also announced its new emissions reduction energy development plan that will use the revenue from the tier system to fund innovation projects in sectors such as hydrogen, petrochemicals, geothermal, and minerals. The key differences are UCP focuses on eliminating the carbon tax for consumers and reducing it for large emitters, while NDP party focuses on maintaining the levy for all emitters and reinvesting in green initiatives. Okay. How will you ensure innovation in government? No, that's interesting, particularly in healthcare and education, even more so. And what steps will you take to increase productivity and resilience in these sectors? It appears that healthcare and education are two of our public sector services, so endearing to Albertans and to Canadians in general, but they're not necessarily viewed as particularly innovative, union dominated. And so if there's going to be innovation in that system, there appears to be some call for leadership. And I guess we'll look for that in terms of what responses we may receive. Do you want to add anything further, John?
There was a report written in the late 90s by, I think, chaired by Don Mazankowski, and they'd been appointed a committee by Ralph Klein. And the opening of the report said, it's all about incentives and the rest is rhetoric. Mm-hmm. So it was an interesting opening line to the report, but ultimately saying, if you want healthcare and education to be innovative, you have to put some sort of incentives in place for people to be that. Mm-hmm. And right now, the incentive might not be there. So it'd be interesting to see what ChatGPT came up with.
Yeah, I mean, when people are threatened, incentives are about the only way, unless you punish them in order to get them moved. But when you punish them, you force them to go underground, not necessarily change their viewpoints. So let's see what the perspectives are. So starting with UCP, their plan to ensure innovation in government, particularly in healthcare and education, is introduce more choice, competition, principles of capitalism, and efficiency measures that will increase productivity and resilience in these sectors. So they see providing a form of incentive, more choice, more competition, and efficiency measures, more management. They propose to expand the role of private providers. Well, they haven't been shy about that, and delivering publicly funded health services such as surgeries, well, like my eyes, diagnostics, and home care. The UCP party also proposes to reform the educational system by increasing parental choice, supporting charter schools and homeschooling, and implementing and standardizing testing and curriculum reviews. Well, it appears to be change-minded. The NDP parties, on the other hand, particularly in healthcare and education, is to increase public funding and delivery of essential services. So more money, more coverage to protect them from cuts and privatization from the enemy, the UCP party. The NDP party has pledged to reverse the cuts to healthcare and education budgets, invest in more doctors, nurses, teachers, and support staff jobs. The NDP party has also proposed to expand public coverage and delivery of health services such as dental care, mental health, seniors care, pharmacare, reproductive health. We've heard that earlier. The NDP party has also proposed to support public education by reducing class sizes, enhancing curriculum, whatever that means, and providing more resources for students with special needs. So The key differences, and they are clearly key here and clearly clear, focuses on reducing public spending and involvement in healthcare and education, while the NDP focuses on increasing the spending and involvement in healthcare and education. So 1C is taking a change-minded approach, which is emphasizing the relevance, I guess, of management and managing the resources that we have better, and the other focusing on just more of the same and more coverage. Number 8, how will you increase transparency and accountability and effectiveness in government decision-making and implementation? And what measures will you put in place to ensure that public service is delivering high-quality services to Albertans? So we've certainly seen questions of trust after COVID. We've seen questions of trust as we've seen various controversies going on at the federal level and sometimes implied at the provincial level. So there is the need for transparency, that's apparent, accountability, that's apparent, and effectiveness for sure. And ensuring that if you're going to be involved in public service, how do you make sure that the services are of quality? John, again, you want to zero in on the transparency element or accountability element?
You know, we've gotten so divided in terms of the extremes running the narrative that we're not sure what the truth is anymore. So yes, we need transparency and accountability. How do we get it? That's a much more difficult one in terms of implementation. Be intrigued to see what ChatGPT.
It really is. I mean, it's becoming an issue not just of government. Virtually every institution today that is facing change on an increasingly more rapid level, media that is constantly disrupting our confidence in the way systems operate, that we're in an environment, and with that chaos comes distrust. Now, maybe that is simply a byproduct of the rapid rate of technological change, or an aging population for that matter, but the forces and sources of change are massive. And with that comes an undermining of trust because change becomes endemic. But there are those that recognize change as a reality, and there are those that want to deny it. And there is a dichotomy in itself. So let's see in the answers whether or not anyone is more ready to embrace change than the other. Starting with UCP this time, to increase transparency and accountability and effectiveness in decision-making and implementation would be to implement various reforms and measures that will enhance oversight, performance, and public trust in government. The UCP parties propose to introduce a Public Sector Accountability Act that will establish clear standards and consequences for ethical conduct. There you are, Shirley. And whistleblower protection, conflict of interest for public officials. The parties also propose to create a Budget Transparency and Accountability Office that will provide independent analysis and evaluation of government's fiscal plans and performance. That's interesting because statistics, Alberta statistics was terminated under Steve West some years ago. The UCP party has also proposed to mandate body-worn cameras for all law enforcement officers to improve transparency and accountability in policing. Whereas the NDP party is proposing to restore and enhance the oversight and reporting and ethical standards that were weakened or eliminated by the UCP government. So there's an attack here. NDP parties vowed to reverse the changes to the Election Act and the Election Finances and Contributions Disclosure Act that reduce transparency and accountability and election financing and spending. So the changes they're proposing are a change in government and to restore some of the measures that they had in place in the past. They've also vowed to reverse changes to the Public Interest Disclosure or Whistleblower Protection Act, the Conflicts of Interest Act, that reduce protection and disclosure for whistleblowers and public officials. The parties also proposed to create a Budget Transparency and Accountability Office. That sounds similar, so we should certainly see that from either party, that will provide independent analysis and evaluation of the government's fiscal plans and performance. I thought that's, by the way, what the Auditor General was supposed to do. The key differences focus UCP on introducing new reforms and measures to increase transparency and accountability and effectiveness in government, while the NDP party focuses on restoring and enhancing what was the existing oversight, reporting, and ethical standards that were reduced or removed by the UCP government. So in one instance, they're proposing reform. In the other instance, they're proposing restoring. On to the next one. What specific steps do you propose to strengthen and diversify the economy in the short and long? We've heard that. and how to ensure that services such as real estate and finances do not lead the way. I'm a little confused with this question. Therefore, I'll ask my commentator if he wants to elaborate on what are they getting at here?
Carrying those glasses on actually producing something that's of relevance from an economic and social point of view. Real estate and finance are secondary components of an economy.
Okay.
You cannot develop a province just developing real estate and finance.
Okay.
You
So
need
increased wealth
sorry?
is on your asset improvement because it's a real estate deal. You really haven't increased the productivity of society.
Yes, yeah, and then the rest follows. So the role of finance is to enable the economy. It's not a standalone form of economy, and real estate is to support the working force. It's not on its own a standalone economy.
Okay, so I mean, under Bismarck, dig a hole, fill a hole. There's an economy. You just create work, you create jobs, whether or not productive or not is irrelevant. But I think you've helped clarify this, that we're talking about productivity, jobs that are actually creating wealth rather than consuming it. Okay, well, let's look at whether or not they picked on those nuances. And I'll start out with NDP this time. They plan to strengthen and diversify the economy in short and long term by investing in public services, infrastructure, education, research, and innovation for fostering creativity, collaboration, and social justice. Well, that's a mouthful, but it's clear. They've committed to creating a $15 billion future fund to support public projects in areas, as we learned, renewable energy, transport, broadband, affordable housing. The party's also pledged to restore funding to post-secondary institutions and research grants that were cut. The NDP party has proposed a $200 million innovation fund to support startups and entrepreneurs in high growth sectors such as technology, renewable energy, tourism, agriculture, and culture. They've also proposed a Green New Deal to reduce emissions and create green jobs. So we have heard much of this in the past, but they put a bit of a nuance on this by fostering creativity, collaboration, and social justice, which we haven't heard before. Whereas the UCP party has proposed in the short and long term to create competitive business environment that attracts investment and talent to support growth in key sectors such as energy, agriculture, technology, tourism, and minerals. They've already implemented the job creation tax cut to reduce the corporate tax rate from 12% to 8% by 2022. It's in place, and launched the Red Tape Reduction Action Plan, which we heard of earlier, to eliminate unnecessary regulations and streamline government processes. The party's also supported the development of pipelines and other infrastructure projects to access new markets for Alberta's resources and has stood up to the federal government and other opponents of the energy sector. The party has also invested in various initiatives to support growth in non-traditional industries, such as the Alberta Technology Innovation Network, the Alberta Enterprise Corporation, the Alberta Petrochemicals Incentive Program, the Alberta Geothermal Development Strategy, the Alberta Tourism Growth Innovation Fund. The party has announced a new emissions reduction energy development plan that will chart Alberta's course for cutting emissions, attracting investment, and growing the economy in sectors as hydrogen, petrochemicals, geothermal energy, and minerals. So this question, in a way, is redundant. The answers we're getting are redundant to what we've heard from in earlier questions, but worth reinforcing. The key differences between the two parties, again, the UCP party focuses on creating a business-friendly environment and supporting private sector growth in traditional and emerging sectors. The NDP party, on the other hand, focuses on investing in public services and infrastructure, supporting public sector growth and more environmentally friendly and culturally diverse sectors. So one of the key differences that is emerging here is one believes in government and government growth and government size is irrelevant. That's one of the strategies for growth and one of the strategies for ensuring long and short-term vibrant economy. And the other is investing more heavily in private sector initiatives by attracting investment and providing incentives for that sector. So that difference is now becoming apparent and has showed up numerous times. What is your long-term vision for the province or community and how you will make it deliver a sustainable and prosperous future for generations to come? We may well hear, again, some of what we've been picking up on the usage of this long-term and short-term vision and short-term actions. But is there anything in here that you've picked up on, John, other than talking now more about the future for generations to come?
No, it is the same undertone. And listen, so many of these questions really are both parties completely agree on the result that they want, and it's just the tour that they're prepared to take to get there.
Very, very good point. That's almost a concluding point. So we'll reiterate that, write that one down, make sure it's not forgotten. So here's the two parties' response. The NDP, long-term vision to create a more progressive, sustainable, and inclusive. That's the first time I think we've seen that word, that works for everyone. The NDP party's vision is based on principles of social justice, environmental stewardship, and public service and democracy. The party's vision is to deliver a sustainable and prosperous future for generations to come by investing in public services, infrastructure, education, research, and innovation that will foster creativity, collaboration, and social justice. This is more focused than we got as an answer to the last question, and clearly showing a more, well, as they put it, principles of social justice, environmental stewardship, and public services and democracy. The UCP, on the other hand, wants to make Alberta the best place to live, work, probably immigrate to, and raise a family in Canada. The UCP's vision is based on principles of robust civil society, freedom of speech, worship and assembly, economic freedom, limited government, fiscal responsibility, public safety, and resource ownership. The party's vision is to deliver a sustainable and prosperous future for generations to come by creating a competitive business environment and supporting growth in key sectors, reforming the health and education systems, investing in infrastructure and innovation, standing up for Alberta's interests. There is a clear distinction here that does stand out on where to place your emphasis. The key difference is focus for the UCP is on creating, again, a business-friendly environment and supporting private sector growth in traditional and emerging sectors, while the NDP party focuses on investing in public services and infrastructure and supporting public sector growth in more environmentally friendly and culturally diverse sectors. It's conceivable that these are areas that the private sector is finding less profitable and therefore not likely to be one that is attractive to public sector involvement or government's involvement or private sector's involvement, sorry. Question 11, before we get to the summary. How will you mitigate the negative impact of federal policies on Alberta's, oh, this has got sizzle to it, to attract investment and development resources, particularly with regard to the challenges posed by climate change, I guess, on Alberta? John, an important question?
Oh, it's vital. It's vital, and it doesn't have sides. It's just an existential issue that we have to deal with. And I think that the federal policies, again, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey. One of Covey's habits is seek first to understand before being understood. And I think we've gotten to this point where we're spending so much time trying to be understood that we don't properly understand what the other side is saying. So I think we have to get to the table a lot more. I would rather see a collaborative approach than just an aggressive.
So sovereignty isn't your first word at the table.
That's right.
Okay. Anyone else that want to add any color? I mean, anyone who's lived in Alberta for any period of time or in Canada for that fact understands the issues of sovereignty, the issues of federal intervention in our economy, the issues of resource ownership going back to the Trudeau dynasty. So we're in the midst of this still, and what approach Alberta takes to it, whether it be the approach of the former premier or the approach of the current premier, this appears to be a policy issue that the voters will have a chance to express. So let's see what whether it's clear in the two parties' approach on what approach they propose to take. So the UCP's ability to attract investment is impeded by the federal government and wishes to develop resources, particularly with regard to the challenges posed by climate change. By defending Alberta's rights under the Canadian Constitution, by accessing federal funding without strings attached, by pushing back against federal programs that create hardships for farmers and ranchers, by developing stronger relationships with other provinces and territories for areas of cooperation and mutual economic prosperity, and pursue legal challenges against federal legislation that infringes on Alberta's jurisdiction over natural resources. The UCP party has also announced its emissions reduction energy development plan that will chart Alberta's course for cutting emissions, attracting investment, and growing the economy in sectors such as hydrogen, petrochemicals, geothermal energy, and minerals. So it clearly sees its role as the Alberta protector and of taking on a significant role in addressing emissions reduction in order to address the climate change issues, which the federal government feels it needs to impose upon the provinces in order to get resolved. The NDP, on the other hand, plan to mitigate the negative impact of federal policies, ability of Alberta to attract investment and develop resources, particularly with regard to the challenges posed by climate change, is as follows: work with the federal government and other provinces and territories to find common ground and solutions that benefit all Canadians. So it's more collaborative. The parties propose the federal government's efforts to build pipelines and other infrastructure projects to access new markets for Alberta's resources, while advocating for more support workers and communities affected by the energy transition. They proposed a Green New Deal that will reduce emissions and create green jobs by investing in renewable energy, energy efficiency, public transit, and innovation. They've also proposed a national pharmacare program that will provide university coverage for prescription drugs and save money for Albertans and businesses. Fascinating. The key differences, and I think they are apparent, the UCP party focuses on creating a business-friendly environment and supporting private sector growth in traditional and emerging sectors. Well, it doesn't go on and note and providing the role of a protectorate for Alberta vis-a-vis the federal government intervention, whereas the NDP party focuses on investing in public services and infrastructure, supporting public sector growth in more environmentally friendly and culturally diverse sectors, but as was noted earlier, taking a more collaborative approach in addressing the negative impact. Okay, the summary. Based on the answers, we fed the answers that GPT and Bing had generated to these 11 questions in order to get some summary. So there's a lot to be consumed there. I mean, we had almost 100 questions to go through, which was too many for my analysis and my twinky little brain. So I used ChatGPT to help me find those 11 or 12 questions, and there were even somewhat redundancy there. But with all of that and the answers in addition, what do we want to conclude? What is the summary? And what is the difference on how one party or another party, the other party, would change Alberta's economy under each party's leadership? Now, the focus here is on the economy, and I need to elaborate on why. For some of you that see issues of social justice and identity politics and some of these, and free expression as being also important beyond just the economy. Well, the survey was focused on the province's economic resilience and its innovation ecosystem. It was not zeroing in on matters that were social in nature. So the orientation of the survey itself is why the focus today is so much on the economy. John, you've made an observation earlier, but let's proceed and then we'll get into a wrap-up discussion. So we'll go directly into the two answers. Under the UCP party's leadership, Alberta's economy would be more competitive, more diversified, and more resilient by reducing taxes and regulations, supporting growth in key sectors such as energy, agriculture, technology, tourism, and minerals. Reforming the health and education systems to introduce more choice and efficiency, investing in infrastructure and innovation to access new markets and opportunities, and standing up for Alberta's interests against federal policies that are seen as detrimental. I mean, I couldn't write it better myself. Thank you, ChatGPT. I'm not saying I necessarily support that versus the other, but it's an excellent summary. Bing AI's NDP party response differs somewhat. And under the NDP party's leadership, Alberta's economy would become more progressive, more sustainable, and inclusive. Different words than what UCP's used. Investing in public services, infrastructure, education, research, and innovation that will foster creativity, collaboration, and social justice, supporting growth in more environmentally friendly and culturally diverse sectors, such as renewable energy, transit, broadband, and affordable housing, expanding public coverage and delivery of health services such as dental care, mental health, seniors care, pharmacare, and reproductive health, and working with the federal government and other provinces and territories to find common ground and solutions that benefit all Canadians. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before getting to the key differences, there appear to be some pretty key differences, and they are summarized well here. Thank you, Bing AI. The key differences, as it has fed them to us, is that the UCP party focuses on resisting and challenging federal policies that are seen as detrimental to Alberta's interests, while the NDP party focuses on cooperating and collaborating with federal policies that are seen as beneficial to Canada's interests. That probably belonged in the earlier summary. The UCP party focuses on supporting growth in traditional and emerging sectors that are based on natural resources, while the NDP focuses on supporting growth in more environmentally friendly and culturally diverse sectors that are based on innovation. So that's our sum up. That's who we are. That's what we've done. I thank all of you that contributed to the survey. I thank Bing, GDP and Jeff Hulich for his help in synthesizing the enormous amount of information that was generated. So we are at wrap-up time. I'll ask those that are with us today for any concluding comments, and I'll start with you, John, before I say thank you. John, any concluding points you want to make about today?
I think the one thing that I'd like to see develop is moving back towards the center, between the center left and the center right. And I think what we're hoping for is to create this discussion. And I think this is a brilliant process that you've gone through. Sorry, Perry. And what ultimately happens is we elect people to govern, and they have to learn that their job is to govern all of the people who voted in the election, not just the people who voted for them. And we've got to really kind of try to drive that. And that was my intention with my article. I think there's huge opportunity with this data. And I think it's brilliant. And if I can, Perry, I'll just give you a little shout out. Perry was recently nominated for an integrity award with Rotary International, which is a very prestigious award, and it talks to who Perry is and all the leadership you've provided to our community. So thank you, Perry. Oh,
thank you, John. We certainly did emphasize, as we put our newsletter together last week, that for the citizens of Alberta to think beyond ideology, to think beyond personality, that this election is providing some pretty clear differences on the policies, and to focus on policy is fundamental. And that's what we've tried to do today. And what I think was apparent in the questions that you, the network, have posed and made available for us to differentiate between the two parties. I apologize to the Liberal Party and to the Alberta Party. They weren't well represented today, for sure. And for that, I guess we owe an apology. But the exercise was really to point out differences. And if they've got something to share with us, I'm more than willing and interested in hearing it, sharing it with others. I'll go around the room and look for any show of hands if anybody wants to make any concluding comments or observations. Go ahead, Jeff.
I just wanted to say that I know you mentioned it regularly throughout the presentation today, that those answers were from Bing AI on behalf of, like, from the perspective of, and it was based on web search and the creative mode of Bing AI stringing together what it found and then putting it into something comprehensible for us to take a look at. I would find it very interesting to know from someone from the UCP or from the NDP to assess the accuracy of that summary. I think it sounds plausible. I think there may be some things that at a high level, it makes perfect sense. And it's a really efficient way of kind of consolidating that information and synthesizing it and identifying differences. But I would still desire to look for some external validation from the actual source. And I don't know if that's probably harder to do than pulling that information together was to do. Anyways, because everybody's busy with the campaign. And then the other thing I was going to comment on is in relation to the discussion about healthcare. And I appreciated John's comments about incentives. And I hope that that's part of that conversation in the future, Perry, because I think, you know, I was going to mention, John, when you were on the board of Caritas, I was working at Caritas and I got laid off as a part of those cuts from Ralph Klein's government at that time.
Incredible.
That was 92. That was, I think, the third round of healthcare cuts. So it's something that you have some direct experience with. Anyways, I was going to relate that back to incentives and say, in terms of the type of leadership that is required and the type of actual change that is required, we are nibbling at the margins constantly, which is why in 30 years, we haven't seen the change in the healthcare system. And I hope that in that conversation ahead, Perry, that we focus on the incentives and also the gatekeepers. And who are the gatekeepers in our healthcare system? It's the doctors. The doctors decide who gets in, who doesn't, who's on the waiting list, who is urgent, who requires something. You know, and you're right about the misuse of the emergency room. And I think there's something really out of whack with how we've set that system up. And with what Ralph Klein started back in the day was constraining the capacity of the system to respond, and then putting so much pressure on the physicians and nurses and other healthcare providers to actually make those really hard decisions of triage as to how someone gets in or has to wait for a hip or a knee replacement. And it's just an awful situation. And I hope we have some opportunity to talk about that in the future.
I want to thank you very much for your input today, your commentary. I certainly thank you for the recognition of my Rotary's appeal of me, but thank you again on short notice for providing us with your insights. And I'd like to know what room you're in right now, though.
That is, it is at the Trinity College, Dublin. It's called the Long Room.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there.
I thought it was a great juxtaposition of ChatGPT and this library, which is one of my favorites in the world. It's
a gorgeous place. I was there in 2017. It's marvelous.
It's just unbelievable. So it's one of my favorite places.
Well, again, thank you. And that's a good point to wrap up. I thank you, David, for joining us. Tommy, for joining us. Jeff, again. Tom, would like to see you again. Bill, Randall, Shirley, Tim, and Bogdan always. So thank you all. Thank you, John. Enjoy the weekend. It's going to rain and we really need it. Take care.